Mommy.
Con un horrible giro de cabeza, El Exorcista creó un nuevo género de cine de terror.
I remember thinking to myself, how am I going to tell my mother?
La gente repetía, es solo una película.
I'm not going back in there.
People were vomiting, it was just this intense, visceral reaction to the film.
Aún así, la espeluznante escena los acercaba más y más a las garras de la bestia.
I ain't never took my coat and hit it over my face like that.
Ver la película era todo un atropello. Hacerla fue todo un infierno.
She was just yelling, "Stop, stop, stop."
People on the set were starting to get a little freaked out.
There was a great feeling that bad things were happening.
I got the sense that the devil's going to get me.
Después de 3 décadas y 3 secuelas, el demonio resurge de nuevo, además de los sucesos extraños.
This place, it's cursed.
I'm coming from a restaurant, walking across the crosswalk, and a car comes from another stopped car, hits me, almost kills me.
¿Coincidencia o maniobras del diablo? Júzguelo usted mismo, si se atreve. La Maldición del Exorcista, The True Hollywood Story.
The dream of being one of
For life's ambition was to be a star.
never recover from the public scandal.
La Maldición del Exorcista. El 20 de agosto del 2004, El Exorcista The Beginning se estrenó en Estados Unidos. El film sobrenatural nos da un preámbulo de lo que ha sido llamado la película más escalofriante de todos los tiempos, El Exorcista en su versión de 1973. El Exorcista The Beginning cuenta la historia del padre Merrin, el cura anciano que practicó el exorcismo en el film original. En The Beginning, el joven Merrin se enfrenta al diablo por primera vez. El Exorcista The Beginning es el capítulo más reciente del fenómeno cultural que comenzó en el 71 con la publicación de la espeluznante novela El Exorcista de William Peter Blatty. El libro, basado en una niña inocente poseída por un demonio, vendió más de 13 millones de copias en solo los Estados Unidos.
It was exciting, and I think it was also comforting in a strange way to a lot of Americans. Here is ultimate good, represented by these heroic priest exorcists that Blatty so graphically portrays in his novel.
2 años después, la versión fílmica del Exorcista se convirtió en uno de los films más taquilleros de los 70 y en una de las producciones más accidentadas de Hollywood.
It was the kind of movie, when the movie was finished, all you wanted to do is leave the movie business and never have anything to do with the movie business again.
El Exorcista tenía un suspenso poco común. De hecho, causó un efecto muy profundo en la mente del público.
I can't even describe it. It's so horrible.
I didn't set out to scare the hell out of people, as you do with a horror film. I set out to make a film that would make them think about the concept of good and evil.
Pero había algo mucho más perturbador acerca del Exorcista.
The reason it was a stunner was that Bill Blatty did his homework. Blatty researched it. He based it on a real situation, a historical, factual situation about a boy who was possessed.
Retrocedamos 24 años a finales del año 49. El lugar, Cottage City, Maryland, una tranquila comunidad en las afueras de Washington. La víctima, un niño de 13 años cuyo nombre nunca se supo. La pesadilla del chico comenzó con una serie de sucesos que no tenían explicación aparente.
The mother and father are out one night, and the grandmother and the boy hear sounds in the walls. It sounds like scratchings in the walls. When the mother and father come home, they tell them, and the father calls in a exterminator, thinking that it's rats in the walls or mice in the walls. Well, there isn't any rat and there isn't any mouse.
En esa época nadie sabía lo que era, pero lo que llamaban posesión estaba cobrando fuerza.
The 3 stages of diabolical activity are infestation, oppression and possession. The first stage, infestation, is usually a beginning when the demonic start to interact with the physical world in connection with the family. You might get whisperings, you might hear small animals.
And then the boy is in bed one night. This is all happening rapidly over a short period of time. And he feels his bed starting to move. This is observed by the mother and father and the grandmother.
Los padres del niño llamaron de emergencia a un ministro luterano.
According to the pastor's testimony of this, he puts the boy on the floor on a mattress. The mattress moves. It goes and bangs into under the part of the bed. And the next morning, the pastor says, this is beyond me. And he tells the father and mother, this is something Catholics understand. He's got to go to a priest.
For people who aren't Catholic, other religious denominations, even no religion at all, by the time they're looking to seek help as far as it being demonic possession, they don't really care who they're going to get their help from. They just want it.
La familia aceptó el consejo del ministro y contactó a un cura católico de la iglesia St. James en Mount Rainier. El cura sabía que se trataba de algo serio.
The priest then checks the boy into Georgetown University Hospital and confides in some people in the hospital as to what he's going to do. And he starts the exorcism. There are stories about what happens next. The boy, although he's strapped down, manages to reach under the bed, break off a piece of the inner spring, and slash the priest's arm. The priest screams. He has a cut on his arm that goes up to his elbow, and he ends the exorcism.
La familia del chico estaba desesperada.
They wound up relocating from the Washington, D.C. area to St. Louis, and at St. Louis University, they were able to make contact with a Jesuit.
His superiors sent him to the Archbishop of St. Louis, who is very reluctant to engage in exorcism. But he does, with reluctance, okay the exorcism. It's very simple. It's just a series of prayers, at that time said in Latin, and it's repetitious. It really just says, I'm the priest, I'm representing Jesus Christ, and in the name of Jesus Christ, I'm telling you to get out of that victim. And then it's supposed to happen. It doesn't happen.
There were apparently horrific demonic fireworks, terrific demonic grotesquerie, howlings from beyond the grave, carvings on the boy's flesh, spinning heads, terrible, terrible, disturbing, frightening, grotesque phenomena. All of this stuff was faithfully recorded in a diary that these Jesuit priest exorcists took.
And this goes on for a total of about 6 weeks. On Easter itself, the boy is more violent than he had been in a long time.
The third stage, actually, possession, is self-explanatory. The demon has, in fact, broken down the person's will sufficiently to possess that person's body.
Ya sin esperanzas, los padres del niño casi se rinden.
On the Monday after Easter, there is the sound of an explosion. Everyone says it sounded like a gunshot. And everyone who hears it senses that it has to do with the boy in the room. And when they go into the room, a boy is sitting up in bed, a big smile on his face, and he says, it's gone. And it was all over.
Pero no por mucho tiempo. Un periodista local se enteró del extraño incidente y lo reseñó en el Washington Star.
He broke the story in the evening paper, and then the Washington Post said, well, we've got to have a story too. And they went after it, and it was a larger story. In 1949, Peter Blatty was an undergraduate at Georgetown University in Washington. He starts to think, wow, this is something I'm going to clip out and keep for a while. It was a sensational story.
Blatty archivó el artículo y continuó sus estudios. En el 51 se enlistó en la Fuerza Aérea. Luego Blatty comenzó a escribir, pero se especializó en humor, no en temas de terror.
He'd been a very well-known writer in the film business. I'm not sure whether this was his first novel or not, but yeah, he was an important writer at that time.
Blatty ganaba dinero escribiendo comedias como el clásico de la Pantera Rosa, A Shot in the Dark. Para el 67, el público se había cansado de las comedias.
Comedy had fallen into decline in the motion picture business. And I said, well, fine, I'm a writer. I can write anything. Put me up for this, that. I couldn't get any serious assignment. Blatty, he's a comedy writer. I mean, just off-the-wall farce is what I was best known for. And so I thought, well, I have nothing else to do other than go down to the unemployment office every week. I think I'll write that novel I've been thinking about for so many years.
Blatty decidió escribir otra clase de historia basada en el artículo que había archivado 2 décadas atrás. El escritor de 39 años contactó a uno de los curas que participaron en el exorcismo en Maryland en 1949.
Blatty gets a letter back from Father Bowden, which I've seen, in which Father Bowden says, I can't tell you anything about this. Preserve don't identify the boy. But he says, I'll tell you one thing about it. It was the real thing. So Blatty changes the victim from a boy to a girl.
En una fiesta en vísperas de Año Nuevo del 67, William Blatty conoció a un ejecutivo de Batten Books y le contó la historia del niño poseído por Satán. El primer día del 68, Blatty había logrado un contrato para escribir la novela que transformó los films de terror para siempre. En breve, luces, cámara y sopa de frijoles.
Anything he did to me was uncomfortable. I mean, they plastered my face in every direction.
Y luego,
It was a great feeling that bad things were happening during the making of the movie.
La Maldición del Exorcista. En el 49, un exorcismo real se convirtió en noticia en un pueblo de Maryland. 20 años después, el escritor William Peter Blatty logró un contrato para documentar el extraño incidente en su libro. El Exorcista se publicó en 1971 y tuvo pocas ventas. Luego Blatty apareció como invitado de emergencia en el show de Dick Cavett. En una semana, El Exorcista se convirtió en uno de los libros más vendidos durante 55 semanas.
Here comes Blatty with his book, seemingly out of the blue. And he was bringing us to a more medieval kind of reality. And he was saying, look, there is supernatural evil. There is diabolical evil. It's afoot in the land.
El Exorcista logró un éxito nacional y los ejecutivos de Warner compraron los derechos para el film. Blatty se aseguró de tener mucha injerencia en las decisiones de la película.
William Peter Blatty was a really clever guy. When it came time to do the film, he made sure that he would be the producer and therefore be able to exert some level of control over the production.
Well, it's very unusual for a screenwriter to get free donuts and coffee, much less come aboard as a producer. But Blatty had written the book, and so he had a little bit of more leverage.
Mientras Blatty adaptaba su novela para el cine, los ejecutivos buscaban al director adecuado. Stanley Kubrick, Arthur Penn y Peter Bogdanovich caracterizaron el proyecto como otra película más de misterio. Finalmente, William Friedkin, el director ganador de un Oscar por Contacto en Francia, accedió a dirigirlo.
Bill Blatty, who I had known socially for a number of years, sent me his novel. I opened the book. I had a dinner engagement, and I opened up the manuscript. I never went out to dinner. I just read it straight through, and I thought, this is fantastic. And I called him and told him, and he said, would you like to make a movie out of it? And I said, absolutely.
A principios del 72, Friedman y Blatty iniciaron la búsqueda del elenco perfecto. Max von Sydow fue seleccionado para el papel del padre Maren. El respetable actor sueco tenía solo 42 años, pero Friedkin y Blatty pensaron que él tenía la combinación adecuada de dignidad y fuerza para personificar al viejo cura. Para interpretar a la madre de la niña poseída, el estudio quería una actriz de primera.
Specifically, they wanted for that role either Anne Bancroft, who was a major star then, Jane Fonda also, or Audrey Hepburn.
Pero Bancroft y Hepburn no estaban disponibles.
And then it was offered to Jane Fonda, who read it and whose response was, and remember now, this was the early 70s, Jane Fonda said, "Why would I want to appear in a piece of capitalist horse like this?"
Ellen Bernstein, de 39 años, tuvo una reacción diferente ante el libreto. Bernstein acababa de recibir una nominación al Oscar por su papel en The Last Picture Show, y ese honor llamó la atención de Friedkin. Bernstein logró el papel. Poco tiempo después, Friedkin fue a ver la obra That Championship Season, un drama escrito por Jason Miller, de 33 años. Miller también actuó en la obra, pero aunque nunca lo había hecho frente a una cámara, Friedkin quedó impresionado con su intensidad. Miller fue escogido para interpretar al joven cura, el padre Carras. Solo faltaba un papel importante, el de Regan McNeil, la niña poseída por el demonio, pero hallar una actriz que pudiera interpretar a alguien inocente y diabólico era lo más difícil.
Juliet Taylor, the casting director, had winnowed through hundreds of New York City school children. We were not looking for an actress. We did not want a Hollywood child. We wanted a real child.
Luego se presentó una actriz veterana de 12 años llamada Linda Blair.
I read originally for the casting director, and the dialogue for a child was extreme. And I remember thinking to myself, how am I going to tell my mother? So I didn't.
We finally got it down to 3, and at that point, Billy and I interviewed the girls, and I have only a vague recollection of that, except that my conclusion was, and certainly his, was that she projected the stability and the wholesomeness and the optimism and the normalcy that we wanted for this girl.
When I met Linda, I knew instantly that she was pulled together enough and bright enough and intelligent enough to deal with this material.
I didn't grow up Catholic. I didn't know about the devil. That's the safety net for why I was chosen to do the character, I think, because it was nothing ever than a monster for me.
Con el elenco listo, Friedkin se concentró en los efectos sobrenaturales requeridos para transformar a la niña en demonio.
I come in for a conference, and he shows, the first thing he does practically is show me a picture of Linda Blair. And here's this cute little 12-year-old girl with a chubby face and everything. And I have already learned what the basic story is. And I think, oh my God, what am I going to do with this? How can I change this into a believable little monster?
Marcel Vancoutier, genio de efectos especiales, quería escenas escalofriantes y brutales en el film.
Billy, I said, I'm going to be the devil, right? That's who I am. I'm the unseen devil. And I said, I wouldn't do that. I said, I'd pick that little gal up and just thrash her, you know. And really? And I said, well, you know, why fool around? And he says, okay, whatever you want to put in there in that bedroom scene, you got it. And I says, okay, thank you. So that's the way we went to New York.
Vancoutier y Dean Smith viajaron a Manhattan para hacer pruebas de maquillaje y de efectos especiales.
This was 3 months before filming was to start. So I immediately started designing several makeups to test. And the first one I did was pretty extreme.
It wasn't like the first test. We said, that's it, move on. We'd shoot a test, look at it, and say, that doesn't work, and for this reason, yada, yada, yada. And so Dick would go back to the drawing board, and he'd come up with something new.
I had found that covering up her brows, building them just a slight bit, but removing the eyebrows, and this gave her more of a skeletal look, and it was more foreboding. And yet it looked very subtle because it looked totally natural.
When I was first introduced to Dick Smith, of course, I had no idea who this man was, nor did I care. Anything he did to me was uncomfortable. I mean, they plastered my face in every direction. First, it was almost a full mask, and Billy Friedkin said, no, I have to be able to know that it's her. Dick made these tiny pieces that just covered different parts of my face. And as he said, to take a so-called like a cherubic face and to make it into something very evil.
Smith y Vancoutier colaboraron para crear un muñeco de Linda Blair que hizo posible la escena imposible.
He did his thing and I did my thing and they both came together.
Linda Blair, de 12 años, requería más que de un muñeco. Sin embargo, Friedkin contrató a la actriz Ellen Dietz como doble de Blair para actuar en las escenas exorcismos más gráficas y de más dificultad física.
And this was on a principal contract, and they specifically spoke to me at that time about just shooting the, as we called it, the abuse of the cross sequence, the masturbation sequence.
Dietz se concentró en su papel de niña poseída.
First of all, they were testing me to see if I could do it, and then they were testing special effects. I just kind of remember going into this outer world, and it's like, Mommy, please, you so, you pig, you so. You know, which is actually isn't in the movie. You never see the two of them. But I had a ball.
En julio del 72, El Exorcista estaba listo para filmarse con un presupuesto de $5 millones y 85 días de pauta para producirlo.
We knew going in that it was going to go longer than scheduled and be more expensive than scheduled. It was an unspoken word, but we knew it. Everybody knew it.
A mediados del 72, el director William Friedkin logró reunir a un elenco y técnicos de primera para filmar El Exorcista, pero nadie les advirtió de lo que se avecinaba. Días antes de comenzar a filmar El Exorcista, el escritor y productor William Blatty emitió una opinión. Blatty pensó que su amigo, el padre William O'Malley, era perfecto para el pequeño pero importante papel del padre Dyer.
They were looking for a genial doofus priest, and I walked into the part like a hand into a surgeon's glove. They couldn't have done better, I don't think. I mean, if they're looking for somebody who is credibly airheaded but smart, how about that?
Friedkin came out of documentary filmmaking, gritty, true, realistic, authentic. And I suspect for him, having the real priest in the film was a way for him to add sort of local color to the film.
Friedkin no se detuvo allí. Él revisó el estudio de la calle 54 y decidió despedir a mucha gente.
We took a walkthrough, and by the time we finished this walkthrough, Billy fired the production designer and the set decorator and hired 2 new people who flew in from California.
A 4 semanas y habiendo gastado $200,000, comenzó a filmarse El Exorcista el 29 de agosto del 72. Friedkin exigió que las primeras tomas fueran excepcionales.
And we're already like a month behind. We haven't shot anything at all. The first shot, we're going to see an egg break next to some bacon. And the camera's going to pull back, start the shot, egg breaks. The bacon is not straight on the griddle. And Billy says, I want straight bacon. I don't want the bacon to curve. The prop man goes out in the neighborhood to find bacon without preservatives and bring it back so that they can have the bacon. I don't know how many hours it took for that to occur, but... And that was the beginning of the making of the movie.
El comienzo de La Maldición del Exorcista se avecinaba. A principios de septiembre, el actor Jason Miller llevó a sus 3 hijos a la playa. Pero la diversión se tornó en tragedia cuando Jordan, su hijo de 5 años, fue arrollado por una motocicleta. Sus piernas quedaron lastimadas y fue admitido en un hospital en condiciones críticas. La producción del Exorcista continuó. A varios días del accidente, el director William Friedkin sostuvo una reunión entre Miller y el padre O'Malley para discutir algunas de las escenas. Pero a Jason solo le preocupaba una cosa: su hijo.
Here it is, something like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and Billy gives us Jack Daniels. And so I'm sipping this Jack Daniels, and Miller is sloshing this Jack Daniels, and Billy excuses himself to take a phone call. And Jason really got sauced, or appeared to be, and he started to cry. And I put my arm around him and let him cry. And all of a sudden I heard Billy Friedkin at the door saying, "Oh, Jesus, if only I had a camera," because we were playing out that scene. He'd set us up.
El hijo de Miller estuvo crítico durante 10 días. Luego tuvo una repentina y milagrosa recuperación. Aún así, el accidente le dio un toque siniestro a la producción.
Some weird things had been happening on the sets and people were getting really spooked about the film they were working on.
En octubre del 72 mudaron la filmación a Washington, D.C. Allí se filmaron varias escenas en la Universidad Jesuita de Georgetown. Fundada en 1789, el padre Thomas King había dado clases de teología en dicha universidad.
When they first came, I remember they were, in general, spooked out in that they felt the devil was after them to try to make them stop making the movie. So anyway, I remember then Blatty asked me, would you bless the movie set as we're ready to start filming? I said, yes, I'll do that. And then he said, how long will it take? I thought, 8 minutes. They wanted everything precise. So I said 8 minutes. I remember then giving a blessing there and sprinkling everybody with holy water for a while. And that was the blessing that we gave as they started filming in town.
El exterior de la casa ficticia de los McNeil también fue filmado en Georgetown.
They took the house and they did make it look like it could be a haunted house. It didn't look haunted at all, just it's a very square, ordinary shape. But they made their little additions and it looked very different.
El perfeccionismo de Friedkin no tenía límites, en especial en una de las escenas más famosas del film, la llegada del padre Merrin.
I got it all lit up and said we were ready, and Billy came to the set and he looked up at the window and he said, you can't have the shade open, you got to have the shade closed on the window. And I said, how can I close the shade and see a shaft of light coming out of it? And he basically said, that's your problem, you work it out, but this is what I want.
El elenco y el resto del equipo regresaron a sus casas esa noche, dejando a Roisman y a su gente buscando una solución.
We actually took the sash of the window with the window frame and moved it back a few feet away from the window and put it on a separate platform, and then took an arc light and put it on another platform alongside of it and shone that through the open window frame now. It took some creative thinking, but it worked great.
Mrs. McNeil.
Yes.
I'm Father Mary.
Come in.
Thank you.
La escena de la llegada del padre Merrin se filmó el primer día de trabajo de Max von Sydow.
Is Father Karras here?
Yes.
Father?
He's here already.
Father Karras.
It's an honor to meet you, Father.
I'm very tired.
No.
I'd like you to go quickly across to the residence, Damien, and gather up a cassock for myself. 2 surplices, a purple stole, and some holy water. And your copy of the Roman ritual, the large one. I believe we should begin.
Sin embargo, a la mañana siguiente, von Sydow recibió noticias perturbadoras. Su hermano había muerto en Estocolmo. Von Sydow tomó el primer vuelo con destino a Suecia. La maldición del exorcista cobraba fuerza. En el film, el padre Karras lucha con el demonio que se apodera de Reagan y nos lleva al clímax filmado en la escalera de 30 metros que conecta la avenida Prospect con el muelle de Georgetown.
You son of a bitch! Take me! Come into me! Damn you! Take me! Take me!
En la peligrosa escena donde el padre Karras finalmente tiene que morir, Marcel Van Coutier se aseguró de preparar adecuadamente al doble.
I took a big plastic bag. I taped it to his back, and I filled the whole thing with blood, fake blood, the whole bag, and lined 90-some steps with half-inch foam rubber. And then he took a run, and then they had the shot where he's in midair, and then he hits and he goes all the way to the bottom. And every time he turned over, the blood came out. Going, and when he landed at the bottom, he was just perfectly right.
Aún así, Friedkin no se detuvo. La escena continúa al final de las escaleras, donde el padre Dyer bendice al padre Karras y le da la extrema unción.
Do you want to make a confession?
And we stop and go into the camper and drink Irish coffee. So here I am talking to this guy I've just given the last rites 5 times and drinking Irish coffee with him, which is an unusual situation. After about an hour, we go back out and we do the whole thing again with the camera over there.
Are you sorry for having offended God? For all the sins of your past life?
So finally, Billy comes over to me, he says, Bill, he says, you're just doing it by the numbers. I said, Billy, I've just given my best friend the last rites 15 times in one night, and it's now 2:30 in the morning. He says, I understand. So he said, do you trust me? Well, you always trust somebody until they ask you. I said, Billy, I trust you. Wham! Right across the face. And he backed out of the shot, and I went in there, and if you look at the scene, or it's actually printed, my hand is going like that. And that's not me. That was the adrenaline caused by that devil Friedkin. He'd do anything to get a shot.
Himself will want to become student. How many partners that deserve you?
A finales del 72, terminaría la filmación del Exorcista en Georgetown, pero la producción estaba atrasada. En el estudio de Nueva York, el elenco y los técnicos se preparaban para las escenas más críticas, incluyendo la del exorcismo. Poco antes de la Navidad del 72, el Diario del Vaticano publicó una sección especial dedicada al diablo. En el reportaje, el Papa Pablo VI reafirmaba la presencia de Satán en la tierra, mientras el director William Friedkin trataba de exorcizar los demonios de su desesperado equipo.
There were all of these things going on where people on the set were starting to get a little freaked out about the film, and it was beginning to interfere, with the work process, with the production.
En enero del 73, el ambiente en el estudio de Nueva York se tornó más tenso.
There was a great feeling that bad things were happening during the making of the movie.
Even I got the sense that, I'm fooling around with something here. The Lord's going to get me, or the devil's going to get me, or something like that. It was a lot of head stuff that you put in your own mind.
Lo que temía Gutierrez se hizo realidad. El actor Jack McGrawn interpretó al director de cine Burke Dennings en el film. Su personaje muere luego de un encuentro violento con la poseída Reagan. 2 semanas después de que McGraven terminara sus escenas, el actor murió de influencia a los 54 años de edad.
Who knows if the production was cursed in any way? Certainly a hell of a lot of things happened.
Luego, según varios miembros del elenco y de los técnicos, un terrible incendio destruyó los escenarios.
The Curse of the Exorcist, you couldn't ask for a movie that could generate more rumors. All I know is that there was one fire, which was real.
Luego de 3 décadas, el supuesto incendio aún está bajo escrutinio.
There wasn't a fire. There wasn't any symptom of a fire. One night or one day or something, one of the 4-aught cables or something started to get hot and it smoked.
I did not see the things that other people maybe saw. The fact that we had an electrical short that caused the set to burn down is not uncommon when you work for a very long period of time, in this case, a year on a set.
I never saw any fire myself.
Solo hay algo cierto, no hubo llamas en las escenas más espeluznantes del film, las de la posesión de Reagan McNeil.
The quest for realism just went to unbelievable levels on The Exorcist. The final portion of the film was set in Regan's bedroom, and Friedkin wanted it to be this unearthly chill in the room, and he wanted to see the actor's breath as they spoke. Now today you could do that with computer-generated effects. You couldn't do that then.
Billy said, I want to see some breath. Okay. And so I built a cocoon around the whole bedroom, 40 feet square, 20 feet high. The walls were about 1.5 feet thick with insulation. I brought in a refrigeration unit and cranked that thing up at night, and we had it down to 10 below zero. And it was cold.
We would do the rehearsal, do the lighting, and then turn the air conditioners back on, and everybody would step out until the room cooled down again. And we had to wait till the room was, I think, close to 20 below zero before we could go back in and shoot.
And Billy wore a famous red jumpsuit, which he was always walking around in.
It was cold, it was difficult, it was uncomfortable. And it wasn't pleasant.
Look down in pity! You killed your mother! Your servant! You left her alone to die! Shut up! I'll never forgive you! Shut up! Bastard!
A pesar de sus exigencias, Friedkin se aseguró de que su joven estrella llevara una vida normal fuera de cámaras, al menos mientras le fuera posible.
Warner Brothers rented a very, very beautiful hotel suite overlooking Central Park, and we had our own kitchen and everything. And then on the weekends, my mother made sure that I had, fun times. And so I'd go riding, I would still see my girlfriends from school, could have some sleepovers. So I still had a normal life on the weekends. But during the week, it was heavy work.
El trabajo era duro y peligroso. Blair era alada repentinamente de su posición contorsionada para simular la levitación y otros actos de posesión.
I made a steel harness, a plate like in the back, and it was all covered with leather, and it was nice and soft, and I strapped her into it. So underneath the bed, here's the hinge. So if she was just laying there, I wanted to pick her up, I just picked her up. She just straight up. So I could do this and then bang, it'd send her back down again.
And the lacing came loose on the sides to keep me in. And it started pounding against my lower spine.
And she was just yelling, stop, stop, stop.
And then finally it was another thing like that when she said, enough is enough, that's when the cameras roll. That's how you get the look on the face.
Basically, they fractured my lower back. But, so the screaming and yelling is real. And I paid for it the rest of my life, but at the time, I wasn't the type that said, send me to the emergency room. My mother wasn't the type to sue, and we didn't do any of that. And who would know that years later, that I was going to pay for that.
She never, ever complained about anything. Never. And no matter how hard I thrashed her, I'd say, Linda, you okay, And she says, okay.
Linda was a trooper. She was amazing. And she was still a 13, 14-year-old girl at the time and full of energy. And between takes, she'd be a little girl. And then all of a sudden, Billy would say, roll, and she'd go right into the character. She was pretty amazing.
La madre de Regan también lo fue. Ella soportó temperaturas heladas y varios trucos espeluznantes.
Nobody was immune from the Friedkin style. Ellen Burstyn, a well-established actress, in one scene was rigged with a harness, and she had to be pushed back against the wall, pulled back, really, with the harness. She said, I could really be injured. I'm not so sure about this.
And Billy, he looked at me and he said, give me the eye. And I give him the eye back, and he said...
And when she turned to go back to the scene, he said to the special effects guy, let's really give it to her this time.
So when I took her back the next time, she didn't hit the floor until she got almost to the wall and hit the wall and bang up against the wall.
If you watch the film, that's real agony on Ellen Burstyn's face. She goes flying back to the ground. She's in real pain, and the camera even pans down to her to catch her expression of pain.
Billy was tickled to death because he got a shot, and Ellen was going to shoot me.
En breve, Friedkin y sus pistolas.
One day, Billy went absolutely nuts with the guns.
Y luego...
The devil could actually
manifest itself on Earth by taking over a person's body.
A principios del 73, la filmación del Exorcista llegaba a su quinto mes, pero la película estaba plagada de muertes, lesiones y extraños accidentes dentro y fuera de las cámaras. En un intento por capturar lo puramente diabólico, Friedkin hizo que los actores trabajaran a temperaturas heladas. A principios del 73, la Warner Brothers le hizo una advertencia a Friedkin.
It's the only time I've ever had to go before the board of directors and reassure them about a picture and its budget, because it developed that media madness of it's a runaway, it's completely out of control, it's a disaster, blah, blah, blah.
The movie went on, and it went on, and it went on.
The reason we were over budget was because Billy was so open and would share challenges about, you know, the breath in the frozen room, the rotating head. We knew that it couldn't be anything less than perfect in terms of effects, because then the whole thing would blow up in smoke.
De hecho, Friedkin buscaba la perfección en cada escena, y los nervios reinaban.
The fights were endless. We probably fired every day. No one took it particularly seriously, except for Dick Smith, the makeup artist, who actually did take it seriously.
Friedkin se extralimitó. Le ordenó a Smith que le cortara el cabello a Max von Sydow. Smith le advirtió que se vería el maquillaje, pero Friedkin no le importó.
I'm pretty tired, and I've been working 7 days a week, the whole production. He comes in, and the first thing he sees is the back of the neck, and he sees there's a little line of demarcation there. And he says, "This is terrible," or something or other, or "This is Mickey Mouse," or something like that. I said, I told you that would happen. He says, "Don't raise your voice to me." Well, I couldn't take that. My ego and everything else and my exhaustion just, I said, "That's it, I quit."
Dick Smith estaba furioso y llamó a un amigo psiquiatra para explicarle la situación.
He said, "You say you've been working 7 days a week for the last 4 months?" He says, "It's very simple, you're having a nervous breakdown." So I said, "Would you put that in writing?" He said, "Sure." So he gave me a letter that Dick's got to get some. I took it in the first thing in the morning, put it on Billy's desk and said, "Billy, I'd like to finish, but I've got to have at least 1 day off a week." "No problem." We're back in business.
Los minutos parecían horas y las sorpresas continuaron.
William Friedkin employed a form of direction on The Exorcist that you might call full body contact. For instance, he had guns placed all over the set in secret, and in the middle of takes, without warning the actors, he would fire off the guns to elicit a real reaction from them, a real fearful, stunned reaction.
He would tell me when he was going to do things so that I wouldn't change. Did he shoot guns? Yes. But I knew he was going to shoot them, so maybe because I was in on so much, it wasn't as frightening to me. What it created was such anxiety and a sense for the actors to really, you know, they've just become unnerved, and then they have to give these incredible performances.
One day, Billy went absolutely nuts with the guns. He was firing guns with blanks, shotguns, pistols, and so on. I think at Max von Sydow. And in the middle of the shooting, while Billy was firing the guns, someone threw a rubber chicken over the wall of the set into the middle of the shot. And they cut, and Billy came out and was looking for the search for the guilty. But of course, no one would own up to it. And for the crew, it was a moment of great lightness, because it was not a light movie, it was a heavy movie.
Uno de los momentos más impactantes del Exorcista sucede cuando Regan le vomita un líquido verde al padre Carras. La esposa de Marcel Vacoutier, el técnico de efectos especiales, ayudó en la famosa escena de la sopa de frijoles.
I was just squirting it, using it, and she went through cases of it, cases of it.
Friedkin quería que el vómito saliera de la boca de Regan sin truco de cámaras.
What is it?
So what I literally did was to take some thin sheets, and I would put them over the life mask to form them to fit the face. So there was a thin, flat gap in between them in the middle So they were basically flattened tubes, and then put on the other end rubber tubes that would go together in the back and go to a longer hose that would go to Marcel Vercouter's pumper, and with a hot pea soup.
And there was a scene where she's supposed to throw up on his sweater, and the cinematographer got his meter out, and they changed this and they changed that. I'm sitting on the other side of the bed, and I says, my pea soup is getting cold. And I said, if it gets thicker, it's going to be harder to shoot, right? So I raised it up. And I guess I raised it up too much. Anyways, when I hit Jason, I hit him flush in the face. And he had a look on his face, he was going to kill me. And I was behind the bed laughing so hard I couldn't hardly get up. I thought it was the greatest gag in the world to get splattered in the face like that.
En el film, la escena no fue nada chistosa. De hecho, resultó muy escalofriante. Luego surgieron más controversias.
We delicately called the masturbation scene the abuse of the cross sequence.
Linda Blair filmó la mayoría de las escenas, aunque Eileen, de 21 años, filmó las secuencias más gráficas y los acercamientos.
It was kind of a rough thing to do, to ask a 12-year-old to be in a movie like this, or to portray everything that was going on. And I do know that that's why I was hired to do the masturbation scene, as much because she was only 12 as for any other reason.
I didn't think it was very nice. I didn't think it was good. I was extremely embarrassed. I thought I would never be talking about it again in my life. It was like a horrible thing for me to have to do.
Aún así, no podían evitar las malas palabras que decía Regan.
Sometimes people would walk up to her and say, how do you handle, the swearing you have to say and the cursing and all these terrible things you have to do? And she would just say, I'm not doing them, Regan's doing them. So she was able to really compartmentalize in a healthy fashion.
A lot of the dialogue in the movie was not in the script. The only people that knew about that was Billy Friedkin, who wrote it the night before, and me, who sat there and looked at this horrific dialogue and said, I can't say that. And he'd say, yeah, you can. And I'd say, no, I can't say that. Because I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know what it meant.
To see this adorable, apple-faced little girl, saying these horrible things was quite astonishing. And apparently on his first take in the film, in the bedroom, in Regan's bedroom, Max von Sydow was so taken back he had to stop the scene.
Number one, remember, I don't want to say these things anyway. So I'm assuming he's prepared. Well, he wasn't prepared. He yelled cut. He was appalled, and I don't blame him. And then he and Friedkin went and talked. That wasn't easy for anybody. I didn't want to say it, and people didn't want to hear it. It's pretty bad.
I think that it must have been extremely difficult for Linda Blair. I think that there's a big difference between theoretical behavior on a page, and behavior in reality, and to be subjected to all this stuff has got to have some effect on you. There was a lot of sexual material, regardless of how sophisticated she was.
I knew, bottom line was, I was strictly hired help. I had to do what I was told to do because that's how I'd been programmed since I was 5 years old.
En mayo del 73 casi se termina de filmar El Exorcista. El elenco y los técnicos terminaron la espeluznante secuencia del exorcismo, incluyendo la escena con la cruz. Luego de 224 días de filmación, William Friedkin insistió en filmar el elaborado prólogo del film en locación en Irak, tal cual como lo escribieron William Peter Blatty en su novela.
Iraq, oh boy. I can tell you stories about Iraq. How much film have you got?
Las escenas en el Medio Oriente serían las primeras en filmarse, pero las demoras en obtener los permisos y visas no lo permitieron. Eso hizo que filmaran en medio del hirviente verano iraquí y los hoteles no eran de 4 estrellas.
It was so primitive then that in the second largest city in Iraq, if you wanted to call out of the country, you had to go to the post office, make out an application, tell them where you would be, generally speaking, and then they would notify you. Now, you would be lucky if maybe 3 days later They came in the middle of the night at your hotel, woke you up and said, you can make your telephone call now.
Para el prólogo de 10 minutos en el desierto, Friedkin filmó 4 horas de cinta.
We were supposed to be there just 1 week. It was so fascinating. It was so picturesque. The things that were, the footage that Billy took just for background stuff. He had a ton of it. And so he was having a ball.
En julio del 73 se terminó de filmar El Exorcista. Luego de un año de trabajo, Friedkin regresó a Nueva York para iniciar la postproducción.
The film, once it was done, happened to be edited at an address, a very specific address in New York City. It was 666 Fifth Avenue. So maybe that was part of the curse too.
En octubre, a 2 meses de la fecha de estreno, Friedkin se trasladó a la costa oeste para mezclar todo lo referente al sonido.
I remember Friedkin pulling out a book of Hieronymus Bosch paintings and saying, I want Linda Blair's voice to sound like these paintings.
Friedkin probó todo tipo de efectos electrónicos, pero nada parecía adecuado. Luego se le ocurrió una idea. La voz del demonio sería humana. Para eso contrató a Mercedes McInbridge, una actriz de 57 años con una voz profunda y carrasposa que nadie olvidaría. McInbridge había ganado un Oscar por All the King's Men, pero El Exorcista requería de otro tipo de trucos.
I know how hard she worked because Billy Friedkin told me that he kept her up for 24 hours, that he had her drinking and swallowing egg yolks and vomiting and smoking cigarettes. And so she went through a lot. She did her own performance in order to give that performance. And it's incredible.
The sound drives the movie. The Linda Blair voice is unlike anything that we've heard up until that time in the history of film sound.
Todo el que vio el corte inicial supo que Friedkin había logrado lo imposible.
I was out in Hollywood for something. It was 6 months later. And I called Billy, and he said, oh yeah, why don't you come on over? I've just finished putting together the masturbation scene. I looked at that thing. It only runs a little tiny bit over a minute. And though I knew every foot of it, had seen every daily, everything, worked on it, all that intimately, chills went up my spine.
My wife at the time, I had a projection room and I ran it a number of times, and she was terrified. She would play Gregorian chants upstairs while I was looking at it downstairs, so as to create a kind of balance of power in the house.
Mientras tanto, el público estaba hambriento por ver algo innovador.
It was the end of innocence with Watergate, with Vietnam. There was no more normalcy in the United States, and I think it was a time of panic and great tension.
I think for the first time in modern American history, people in the nation were really looking at all these problems and saying, you know, we have all this technology, we have all this modern culture, but is it really helping us?
3 días antes de estrenarse El Exorcista, Friedkin aún le daba los toques finales al film.
In point of fact, it wasn't finished until the very last minute, and I believe that we had to use a couple of the Warner Brothers jet aircraft to get the prints out in time.
En breve, El Exorcista horroriza a todos.
People were vomiting, you know, it was just this intense, visceral reaction to the film.
Oh, God, I can't believe it.
Luego de 11 duros meses de producción en Georgetown, Nueva York e Irak, se estrenó El Exorcista ante un público que no sospechaba lo que vería. Al día siguiente de la Navidad del 73, El Exorcista se estrenó en solo 22 salas de cine en selectas ciudades de la nación.
The studio wasn't really ready for what this film was. They didn't know exactly what they had in their hands. So when Warner Brothers released the movie, they were not ready for the gigantic audiences. People just came and waited for hours and hours to see that movie.
On a more orderly line. You're blocking the sidewalk.
La reacción ante el film fue algo nunca visto en la historia del cine.
No. Why was that? I'm not going back in there. I have a friend in there alone, and I don't want to leave her in there alone.
People were running up and down the aisles who came in to see the film. There were people who had reported they fainted, or that people were vomiting, or that people were praying. You know, it was just this intense, visceral reaction.
Para aprovecharse del impacto, el estudio distribuyó el film en más salas de cine. William Peter Blatty y William Friedkin de pronto se convirtieron en personas famosas.
The index of how successfully the two Bills did it is that people tended to believe it. I mean, they thought that experientially it was quite possible.
I'm not standing here shaking for nothing.
How about you?
It's very, very real. I don't like it. I want to go home.
I want to see if it's going to make me throw up.
Man, that is one of the most grossest movies in the world. It is. I ain't never took my coat and hit it over my face like that.
It doesn't bother me that much, but I guess it bothered her more than it bothered me.
El Exorcista rompió récords de taquilla en toda la nación. Las críticas no eran excelentes, pero el público colmó los teatros.
The numbers were extraordinary. It became a sort of phenomena. It was, you know, I think perhaps the most successful film that we had made.
El 9 de enero del 74, El Exorcista recibió 7 nominaciones al Golden Globe, incluyendo 2 para Linda Blair como mejor actriz de reparto y como nueva estrella del año. 2 semanas después, en la ceremonia, el film ganó como mejor drama, por mejor director y por mejor libreto. Blair ganó el premio como mejor actriz de reparto.
It was a standing ovation, and it was too much. I'm very sensitive, and I mean, I just started crying.
Pero la maldición del exorcista no había terminado. En un artículo del New York Times el 27 de enero, la actriz Mercedes McCambridge denunció a Friedkin y a Warner Brothers por no incluirla en los créditos.
Mercedes McCambridge was hired originally to do the voice, and there are discrepancies of how the credits went down. You have a credit, you don't have a credit, and I wasn't privy. Very few people were. I don't know the truth behind that. I think anybody should have a pretty good idea. I don't talk like that. And she did an incredible job.
El gremio de actores intervino y McCambridge logró que la incluyeran en la lista de créditos. Pero surgieron más controversias. En febrero del 74, el LA Times reportó que el estudio le hizo firmar a Ellen Dietz un documento que le prohibía decir que ella sirvió de doble de Linda Blair en varias escenas.
That's what her job was. That's what she was hired to do. But Billy didn't want to, because you wouldn't be talking about the film today. You would have said, well, it was somebody else that did it, and they just had this young girl, and that would have been it.
A pesar de la controversia, El Exorcista fue nominado para 10 premios de la Academia, incluyendo los de Mejor Director y Mejor Película. De nuevo, Linda Blair, de 15 años, fue nominada como Mejor Actriz de Reparto. Sin embargo, en la ceremonia Linda Blair no ganó. El premio lo obtuvo Tatum O'Neal, de 10 años, por Paper Moon.
The nomination is something I still have for the rest of my life. But it didn't bother me, because adults have more knowledge of why they need to win, maybe, because it can change their career completely. For me, it was more like I was just in awe of being there. And for Tatum to win, that was fine. I thought she did an incredible job.
El Exorcista obtuvo 2 Oscar. William Peter Blatty ganó en la categoría de Mejor Adaptación de una novela y Chris Newman ganó en la categoría de Mejor Musicalización.
I was nominated for The French Connection and we lost to a musical, Fiddler on the Roof. I was nominated for Godfather 1, which is as fine a soundtrack as I've ever been connected with, and we lost to Cabaret. I was nominated for The Exorcist, and the only reason we won was because there were no musicals that year.
El Exorcista no ganó las primeras categorías, ni la de Mejor Director, ni la de Mejor Película. Sin embargo, el film se convirtió en el segundo mejor éxito de su época luego de El Padrino.
One thing that happened as a result of The Exorcist being such a big hit was that Hollywood saw that they could release movies in hundreds of theaters at the same time. So a few years after this, you had Jaws, which was released on about 400 screens. And the pattern was really set, thanks to the success of The Exorcist, for the big, wide-release blockbuster movie.
El impacto del Exorcista trascendió a los récords de taquilla.
Exorcism was generally regarded as a thing of the past, as a sort of medieval hangover, and people clearly were not missing it. After the movie, there was an explosion of interest in exorcism across the land, and there's no question in my mind that the movie had a great deal to do with it.
A principios del 74, El Exorcista recibió 4 Golden Globes y 2 Oscar. Legiones de fanáticos de todo el mundo convirtieron a la película sobrenatural en un super éxito de taquilla. Eso creó un nuevo género de films de terror. El impactante éxito del Exorcista le abrió el apetito al estudio.
Studios are factories, and they have a factory notion of filmmaking. They feel that films are sausages, and factories turn out sausage factories, and if they did it once, they can do it again.
Warner Brothers for many years asked about doing The Exorcist 2. It's only natural to do a sequel. And we said no. No.
All these guys who are planning prequels and sequels, in my opinion, they're just rip-off artists. I would no more direct a sequel of The Exorcist than I would, jump off the roof of this building. Nor have I any interest in seeing one.
William Peter Blatty at the time, I believe, said he didn't really have an idea for a sequel.
Blatty mantuvo los derechos del Exorcista. Sin embargo, él le permitió a Warner Brothers una opción única para producir una segunda parte sin su participación. En el 75 el estudio inició la producción del Exorcista 2, The Heretic. Max von Sydow interpretó de nuevo al padre Merrin y otros actores se unieron al proyecto. Linda Blair participó de nuevo como Regan McNeil.
They finally presented a screenplay that was so amazing, and you would be foolish to say no. They presented me Richard Burton, James Earl Jones, and John Borman. How could you miss? And for me, just working with Richard Burton, woo!
El 24 de mayo del 76 se inició la filmación del Exorcista 2 The Heretic, con John Borman como director, pero sin buenos augurios.
It was a mess, and it every day changed. Too many cooks spoiled the brew, and the film never had a chance.
For some reason, the creators of Exorcist 2 decided it was important to name on screen the demon who had haunted Regan in The Exorcist. Now, the character was named in the book. Fine. It was a Mesopotamian mythological god named Pazuzu. Pazuzu looks fine on a page. If you have a theatrical actor like Richard Burton, who played Father Lamont in the film, constantly saying Pazuzu, it becomes funny. I mean, he says, Kakumo can help me find Pazuzu, and Pazuzu, spirit of the air and darkness, lead me to Kakumo. You just can't keep saying Pazuzu and Kakumo in a horror film and expect it to be taken seriously.
Dick Smith era otro veterano del primer Exorcista y decidió arriesgarse con el segundo.
What Borman did was say, use the same contact lenses, but just make her look sexy, and that will be the Pazuzu, Well, first of all, it didn't work on Linda. I mean, she was still pretty young, and she just didn't come off as an evil bitch, shall we say.
La filmación terminó en noviembre del 77. 7 meses después, El Exorcista, The Heretic, fue estrenada en toda la nación. Sin embargo, no hubo largas filas de personas desmayándose en sus asientos. De hecho, el film resultó un fracaso financiero y artístico. William Friedkin, director del primer Exorcista, se lo esperaba.
I looked at it, and I was able to see about an hour of it before I literally got sick. To me, it's a stupid film made by inferior intellects who are just out to rip off an unsuspecting public and separate them from their hard-earned money.
I do believe there's a different curse of The Exorcist, and this one I have lots of proof for. This curse involves any director attempting to make a sequel to The Exorcist. They're all doomed.
William Blatty le atribuyó su fracaso a la débil historia. Blatty también tuvo discrepancias con el film original y se dispuso a filmar uno mejor.
He felt that some viewers went away from that film feeling that evil had won, although that certainly wasn't his intent. So, after a period of years, he thought, well, I would like to have the other side of that equation, and he wrote this novel, Legion.
Legion estaba ambientado en Georgetown, 15 años después del primer Exorcista. La novela salió a la venta en el 83 y se convirtió en un éxito, pero Blatty aún no estaba dispuesto a vender sus derechos. Él quería dirigir la versión fílmica. 6 años después hizo su sueño realidad. James Robinson, director de la productora Morgan Creek, accedió a financiar el film.
I felt it was a franchise, and I felt that somewhere down the line it should become a TV series, and then if that worked, then we do another sequel or prequel, whatever.
Sin embargo, la novela que produjo Blatty sorprendió a los ejecutivos del estudio.
It was a subdued, sensitive, intimate film that had all of these really interesting theological discussions in it.
You believe in possession, Father?
What happened is the studio said, well, we want to sell this as a sequel to The Exorcist, so we want to call it Exorcist 3. And William Blatty had 2 problems with that. First, there was no exorcism in the film, so why call it Exorcist? Secondly, why would you want to reference Exorcist 2, The Heretic, which was so bad, and give this a numeral like 3? So that was a problem, but it did become Exorcist 3, and when studio executives realized there's no exorcism in this film, they made him go back and shoot an exorcism for the film, even though it didn't have anything to do with anything.
A pesar de ciertas discrepancias y de una escena provisional que no tenía sentido, Blatty le imprimió su magia.
In William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist 3.
El Exorcista 3 recaudó 25 millones y dio ganancias. A pesar de las críticas discrepantes.
It was faithful enough to The Exorcist to make people remember The Exorcist fondly, yet it was original enough and interesting enough to have its own life force, to have its own intelligence to it. I think it was a good and underrated film, and way better than Exorcist 2, The Heretic. No Pazuzu in this one.
En breve, una película y 3 directores.
Toward the end of the shoot, I started getting a feeling that there was something amiss.
En el 77, El Exorcista 2, The Heretic, fue un desastre artístico y financiero. Luego de una década, su autor William Peter Blatty reunió otro espeluznante elenco de personajes y logró un moderado éxito con El Exorcista 3. Pero ¿querría el público más terror? ¿Qué tendría que soportar el elenco y los técnicos para crearlo? James Robinson, director de la productora Morgan Creek, compró todos los derechos del Exorcista. Robinson tuvo varios intentos fallidos para crear una serie de televisión y contrató a William Wisher para escribir el libreto de un largometraje que precediera al primer Exorcista. Mientras tanto, Blatty y el director William Friedkin convencieron a Warner Brothers para que relanzara El Exorcista original con varias escenas extra que nunca fueron vistas. El 22 de septiembre del 2000, El Exorcista volvió a los teatros de toda la nación. El film horrorizó a toda una nueva generación y recaudó $100 millones más.
Well, I wasn't allowed to go when I was little. It was kind of a banned thing. My mom's.
Pero en mayo del 2001, otro miembro del Exorcista original moriría. Jason Miller, de 62 años, falleció repentinamente de un infarto. En la productora Morgan Creek, Robinson ordenó que mejoraran el libreto del film que predecería al Exorcista original. Robinson contrató al famoso novelista Caleb Carr para que puliera el bosquejo de William Wisher. A finales del 2001, John Frankenheimer decidió dirigir El Exorcista The Beginning. Su currículum incluye films como The Manchurian Candidate y Black Sunday.
It was wonderful to get to know John, and we set up a very nice relationship. We actually were scouting in Spain, France, all over the United Kingdom, looking for something to double for Africa, which was a crucial part of the script. The entire second and third act take place in British East Africa. It was quite an experience going with John. Was one of the icons of directing the American cinema.
Varios actores de primera fueron candidatos para el rol del padre Merrin, el cura que combatió al demonio en El Exorcista original. El actor Liam Neeson, de 50 años, fue seleccionado. Con un director de legendario y actores estelares, El Exorcista The Beginning auguraba ser un gran éxito. Pero en julio del 2002 comenzaron los problemas.
Could have been a month, I'm not sure now, 6 weeks before principal photography was to begin, and John had an operation, something on his back or neck.
Más tarde, Frankenheimer sufriría una embolia masiva. El director murió el 6 de julio del 2002 a los 72 años. Su muerte sorprendió a Hollywood y a todo el equipo de producción.
The fact that he passed away, a lot of people were wondering what was going to happen.
Luego se enteraron. Liam Neeson renunció al proyecto luego de la muerte de Frankenheimer. Paul Schrader sería el nuevo director. Su currículum incluye films como American Gigolo y Cat People.
I like the script quite a bit. They had location scouted. They had a cinematographer, Victorio Storaro. So it was a case of sort of slipping into a preset mold.
Schrader contrató al actor sueco Stellan Skarsgård para reemplazar a Neeson. El 11 de noviembre del 2002 iniciaron la filmación en el desierto de Marruecos, donde el cura se encuentra por primera vez con Satán. De pronto comenzaron a suceder cosas extrañas tras las cámaras.
Whereas when we were in Morocco, in Marrakesh, in the production office, the fax machine turned itself on one day. It started printing out sixes, just constant, line after line after line of sixes. And the people in the office were genuinely freaked by that.
3 meses después, el director Paul Schrader se sintió incómodo por una razón muy diferente.
We shot, I think, 5-6 weeks in Morocco, the same amount of time on stage in Rome. Toward the end of the shoot, I started getting a feeling that there was something amiss, because I was getting more and more comments about it not being scary enough. You know, we were so deep into it that at that point, the mold had been cut, you know. It was very, very hard to change.
En el 2002, el famoso director de cine John Frankenheimer murió durante la preproducción del Exorcista The Beginning. Paul Schrader lo reemplazó como director. Sin embargo, continuaron los problemas que plagaron los 3 films anteriores. El Exorcista The Beginning cuenta la historia del padre Merrin, el viejo cura que practicó el exorcismo en la película original. En The Beginning, el joven Merrin se enfrenta al diablo por primera vez. Luego de varios meses en locación, casi se termina la filmación. Sin embargo, nadie parecía contento. En abril del 2003, Schrader le mostró el trabajo final a James Robinson.
When I watched the movie, I said, this movie is not going to work broad-based. It's not going to work with the general population around the world like I want it to work.
I had the feeling that the decision had already been made. And the initial decision was to reshoot. And that, and I, as I said to them at the time, I said, you know, you're not talking about small changes here.
The Exorcist is a very valuable franchise. And the way to protect the franchise and make it more valuable or maintain its value is to continue to make good product, good movies.
There never was a great deal of discussion about my cut. I think I spoke with the head of the company for a total of 5 minutes, maybe.
Within 2 weeks, I'm having meetings putting together another movie, a brand new movie, again, The Exorcist. And we changed the cast, we rewrote the script, and we put a new director on.
Rennie Harlin fue su rival principal con un currículum que incluía films como Die Hard 2 y Cliffhanger. Harlin demostró que podía cumplir a cabalidad.
The studio was expecting to maybe shoot a couple of weeks of reshoots and adding little spice here and there. My idea was that you should really shoot the whole film from beginning to till end and make a different kind of a film, because I sensed that that's what the studio was really after. At the same time, I felt that this was a perfect escape route for me and I would never hear from them again. Little did I know that about a week or 2 later, I received a call and they said, well, we've now talked to a lot of people and your idea really sounds the best. we really should redo this whole thing.
Harlan comenzó inmediatamente y de pronto fue objeto de la terrible maldición del exorcista.
We have just come up with this sequence that is very disturbing, and while the movie is not very gory, in this one sequence you have a very disturbing sequence that involves blood. And when I went home the next day, I wake up to my dog screaming in pain. And I see my dog hemorrhaging onto the floor, spraying blood. And I grab my dog, wrap her in towels, take her to the clinic. She goes into emergency surgery. She's already dead when she arrives at the clinic. They revive her with blood transfusions, and they never find out what was wrong inside her. She was in the hospital for a week and completely recovered.
Harlan estaba asustado, pero decidió filmar la película. En diciembre del 2003, se fue a Roma para comenzarlo. El cineasta Vittorio Storaro y el actor Stellan Skarsgård fueron contratados de nuevo. El rol de Skarsgård como el padre Merrin era crucial.
I mean, there's almost no footage from the original Schrader version that's in the Rennie Harlan version, except for some establishing shots when we were in Africa. But since we changed so many of the principal characters, Stellan was the only of the top 4 lead characters, the only one that stayed. And we recast the other 3 roles because of other commitments. And when you recast the roles, of course, you have to reshoot all the dialogue. To work with a studio that had the courage to do that is very unique. I don't think that that has or will happen in this form again.
La filmación comenzó sin problemas, pero a las 2 semanas, Harlan se enfrentó directamente con la maldición.
I've never missed a day of work in my life. Never had any kind of injuries. I've done movies on mountaintops and on racetracks. I've been shooting for 10 days in Rome. I'm coming from a restaurant in the evening, walking across the crosswalk, and a car comes from another stopped car, hits me, almost kills me. I'm taken to the hospital. My leg is very badly broken. When I saw the x-rays after the operation, and I looked at it, I realized that there are 13 screws in my leg. And I was in the hospital for 2 weeks.
Hubo más malas noticias.
But we toughed it through. It was a tough movie to make. Tough movie.
A principios del 2004, luego de 30 años de impacto del primer exorcista, su cuarta parte ya estaba casi lista. Todos los involucrados con el exorcista The Beginning se preguntaban ¿qué más podría salir mal? El productor James Robinson y su compañía Morgan Creek tenían a un monstruo en sus manos. John Frankenheimer, primer director de la cuarta parte, murió repentinamente. Paul Schrader, su reemplazo, fue despedido, y los fantasmas de las producciones anteriores afectaron al tercer director, Rennie Harlan.
Did I think we had a lot of bad luck? I've never had so much damn bad luck.
There was definitely an atmosphere where odd things kept happening.
But tenacity, perseverance. I mean, what am I going to do? Stop working on this movie? No.
The original Exorcist is one of the scariest movies ever made. And Exorcist at the Beginning was probably one of the scariest movies to make.
I've been in these situations before, and you have to stay on top of them.
A mediados del 2004, Rennie Harlan se apresuró para terminar El Exorcista The Beginning.
This is definitely the fastest film I've ever made. And in about 5 weeks' time, we wrote the script, prepared the movie. We were shooting before Christmas. We finished in February.
The second movie is going to run us somewhere between 50 and 60% more, all in, than the first movie, which was not cheap either.
In the one I did, I think they pulled the plug on it at about $35 million, and I think that the theatrical version will be north of 50.
El costo total de la producción, casi $90 millones. El costo de mercadeo y distribución aumentó dicha cifra.
Now, why are we doing that? Because I feel that I don't want to cheat the movie.
De hecho, Robinson tenía 2 films y de manera nunca vista decidió estrenar ambas versiones del Exorcista The Beginning, la del director Paul Schrader y la del director Rennie Harlan.
So, well, we can take this, the Paul Schrader version, go DVD, and also go cable, and also go network, and also go syndication. So all is not, or nor was all lost.
To be honest, I think it's a financial decision. DVDs now drive film revenues.
We'll recoup probably 2/3 of our money.
You do have two standalone movies, same title, same premise, same lead actor, same cinematographer, with completely different sensibilities and different stories.
I'm sure there'll be people who will really appreciate the version Paul Schrader did, and hopefully there'll be people who appreciate the version we have done.
To be able to look at those side by side and see how you approach storytelling from two different points of view, I think would be invaluable.
La fecha para el lanzamiento en DVD de la versión de Paul Schrader del Exorcista The Beginning aún no ha sido anunciada, pero el 30 de agosto del 2004 la versión de Rennie Harlin debutó en más de 3,000 teatros.
I think the key to why Exorcist became such a classic 30 years ago is that it was a very unique concept, and a concept that was based on reality. It wasn't a story of a mass murderer with a knife or something that we had seen before. It was rooted in very, very religious reality about the battle of good and evil in this world, and the fact that the devil could actually manifest itself on earth by taking over a person's body. We tried to create situations that were quite different, yet the principle is the same. The demon is on earth, and the demon can get into the mind or minds of people and take them over.
¿Creen ustedes que el demonio practicó su maleficio en todos los films del Exorcista? Todo indica que esa pregunta nunca tendrá respuesta.
Now, many things are known about the film, how we did certain special effects, but there are certain things that we still like to keep slightly secretive so that you look at the film and really appreciate and listen. It is a brilliant, brilliant film.
When you expose the devil, and the original movie, The Exorcist, it did expose the devil. He doesn't like that. He'll cause phenomena to take place.
Well, Ellen Burstyn has claimed that 9 people involved with the shooting of The Exorcist died. But you have to realize it's sort of like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon or something. Some of these people were people's brothers who had nothing to do with The Exorcist, or people's cousins or uncles. I don't know. I don't think you can really count that on the scoreboard against The Exorcist.
I'm not the most religious person, but I do believe that. I believe there's good, and I believe there's evil. And this is going to sound corny, but I really believe this. Nobody can take your soul. You have to voluntarily give it up. Nobody can make you become evil. You've got to embrace it. This movie does send that message. You see it very, very clearly.
Cut. Perfect.
Fantastic movie. It's really gross.
It was really terrific.
I want to see if it's going to make me throw up.
I've never in my life known a movie where people would faint. I mean, it's hard to make people faint. Well, as soon as they faint, I get out the smelling salts.
I can like devil coming out of her.
It's gross. I tell you that. Yeah? Man, that is one of the most grossest movies in the world.
I don't like it. I want to go home. Makes my heart beat too fast.
I don't know, it doesn't bother me that much. But I guess it bothers her more than it bothered me.
This is the second time we've seen it. We still can't hack it. No.
Why was that?
I'm not going back in there.